are joining for the first time, I am Richie Peria, cybersecurity and GRC enthusiast, host of the Cyber JA podcast, pretty much a podcast that is geared towards helping, those who are new trying to venture into cybersecurity. So I pretty much spend a lot of time in terms of sensitizing persons in relation to cybersecurity and GRC. So on today's podcast, we have Chris. Uh, that's Chris Carter, and he also tells me that he goes by the name Umar, depending on the circle of friends that he's associated with. So, Chris, nice to have you joining me on the Cyber JA podcast.
No, like I said before, I'm really about the topic. I think over my last years plus, I've have I have combined both in the business and outside of the finance side, um, mergers and acquisition, some cyber analytics, or just basically where they are today and where they need to go. It's been a journey, and I think they kudos for doing what you're doing. Cybersecurity, young industry, and I think we're at a pivotal moment where there are a lot of people trying to get into space. Right? How do we have a conversation around and empowering people coming into the space, not only keep our networks and our assets secure, but also grow and make the space even better.
Exactly. So that's something that's required even more today in today's environment. But just before we actually get into all of the details and the interesting things that I'm looking forward to, it's more about you sharing your journey, your experience, your story. Because all of us have a story before we actually get to where we are now. So my aim at this point in time is just to get to know a little bit more about you, for others to know, your background, where did you start, how did you pivot your way into where you are now, just to for persons to kind of understand where you're coming from.
Absolutely. So I started out my career in finance and accounting. Moved myself up a junior analyst all the way up to being I then segued into sort of being for a number of countries in Asia Pacific while doing audit work. During the project, right, SOX, right, was also a big part. So from a GRC perspective, you mentioned we did a lot of COVID stuff, and as you know, in cybersecurity, when you talk about government SOX is a big part of it. Depending on framework that you leverage, going to come up at one point or the other. So having being in, I'd say, finance plus years, a recruiter, I was working for a data security company. I was exposed, but I think one of the critical me was I was always curious, right? We did two-factor authentication. It was so I tried to understand what two-factor, what's the difference between, for example, multi-factor authentication, strong authentication ways, user can access a resource. I think that's what helped me that time in terms of understanding the GRC. Look, or fortunately, out to me, it was for a GRC position. However, they were transferable uh, because of the fact that I did auditing. The principles remained the same. We're not only we were managing risk in accounting side of the house, but when it comes to this, also managing risk, right? Principles remain a different arena. So I was able to use those skills from finance and cyber. Uh, and the other thing is able to transfer that skill set. Some weird way I would look at it. I had a broader picture than someone who just grew up and understood the business. I understand the finance of those controls or lack of control, exceptions, things that are specific to ensure a solid GRC program I was working in. I kind of have that understanding of how to manage an.
Okay, sure. Quite an interesting mix there, especially for those who are, I mean, well seasoned and experienced in cybersecurity. Because one of the things as it relates to cybersecurity today is the fact that I'm trying to, over the past few weeks, to encourage and to kind of guide upcoming cybersecurity professionals in the industry is to have an holistic approach to cybersecurity. And what you have just mentioned pretty much sums it up in terms of what the industry is looking for. Not only for persons to have that tunnel vision in terms of, oh yes, I'm a cybersecurity expert that specializes in using tools or the technical aspect of things, but it has now extended itself beyond just being able to focus on the technical side of things, but is now a combination
Absolutely.
of having that business mindset along with the technical aspect, as you were saying. So you would
Absolutely.
shed some more light along that path. That is one
Yeah,
of
and
the things that
that's kind of
cybersecurity persons don't really understand.
yeah, and that's what I was kind of alluding to is that sometimes people who are the cyber industry they think coming in at a disadvantage, and I'll tell you from or talking to C-level executive cyber risk, um, being industry could actually be it would it's much easier for someone coming in to a board member or someone at the C level. And here's why I say that. It's a very common. My point is they know where uh, the risk lie and how it impacts the bit of the world. And I'll give you a very specific example. We were just talking, and there was a nurse, right, migrated from being a nurse into the field. She was the one in a vulnerability to that it's important to invest in that would reduce that vulnerability, right? And she used a basic example, and she said, "Okay, right." And then she went down the example path of creating that analogy, like ourselves who have been who either grew up in have been in the space long enough. We probably as someone new who's new coming. So I think having that business background, right, can be necessarily always an advantage, but especially explaining, quantifying, analyzing, articulating the risk to leadership, and that's a critical skill that someone outside of has already gained. Right, as you're in marketing, you're in accounting, um, with that business, that rich information that no one can take away from you. That makes sense. I'm not sure. I kind of talked for. Um, hopefully, it makes sense.
Sure. Definitely makes sense. And you have touched on something important, and is when you get into cybersecurity, can you shed some more light as to the importance of developing that leadership ability in executing your duties? Speaking from a standpoint of the fact that you are a cybersecurity professional in terms of your leadership abilities, how has that actually helped to progress your career? I mean, at the simplest level, moving up.
Again, as I came from the business, I've led multinational teams. I've led global teams, standing the business, right? Being able to the value of cyber to the business is for me to articulate the value of the business, and I have to be able to speak the language. Just before we started, you and I were talking, and our audience are we going to be speaking to? Is it a global, a Jamaican? We're both Jamaicans, so started talking right in patois, assuming we have folks from other parts of the world, language to them, right?
Exactly.
It's hard for them to know, but because they don't speak the language, it's hard for them. So you and I will know, and it's the same as to being to speaking in so the business can understand, right? Somewhere, it's really hard. If I break out in right, no one is going to be able to understand. Communicating or using the same language, right? In addition to speaking the same language, textual information. Because if I go to see a C, I say I want a $5 million project, reduce the vulnerabilities on my WAF, you start losing the business. However, if you can say, hey, Mr. CEO or Mrs. CEO, 5% chances of all facing applications going down if we don't $5 million to reduce valued at $50 million in conversation. But in order for me to speak that language, I have to have a tacit on what's critical to the business and what the business if it's not up and running. So that's leadership when you talk about communication, having a contextual understanding of the audience and knowing the subject matter.
Exactly. That's a very important point in terms of having those soft skills as a professional within the cybersecurity industry. And at times, persons, even during this week, even up to yesterday, I have what's somewhat like a counseling session for a number of cybersecurity professionals that have been very frustrated, going through very hard times, especially with the COVID situation. Persons who are just getting out of college, universities, persons who have lost their jobs. And the thing is that they are saying that they have so many certifications, they have gone through university, they have degrees, but yet still there are challenges to getting a job. And I was saying to them that, look, there are many opportunities and there are many of us. How can you make yourself stand out? How can you make yourself different in light of all that is happening? But the truth is, I used to think that way. And then I begin to have a different outlook on life, whereby instead of seeking jobs, hunting jobs daily, because I did that to a point of frustration. And I had to make a turn to say, what can I do for myself? What abilities, what skill set do I have to make that transition to make that pivot, whereby persons seek me in terms of creating my own brand and representation. Can you share some light on that in terms of whether or not that actually makes sense with what is happening today?
A lot of times we give our power. So I'll address the first. A young student matriculating, they have the cert, they've applied for job, right? So let's address that piece first. How do we empower ourselves to right get to attractive, right? So the first part is so just tactical advice, right? Your resume 10 times, and you probably send it out 100 times, right? Send your resume out 100 times and you get no hits. Talk to a resume writer, right? Get someone to help resume highlight your skills, right? The second piece is, as a hire folks, I would look for three things. It includes the stuff you've learned at school, vacations, and right, go posts and things like that. The second thing, experience, right? So, in previous roles, right, there is passion, right? Coming out of college, right, or maybe two. So, what as a person who's looking for a job, enjoyable, I would say, harden cybersecurity into your home, right? So you say, you know what? I've installed a fire harden my router. I now a VM tool that I can VM around the world, right? So the manager would say, this person experience, but they demonstrated a passion for the work. They've also demonstrated, so you can hit, you could feed two birds by doing those things, right? Harden your internet home, be your mom's or your father's or your cousin's cybersecurity person, girl or guy. So there I think are things that you could do to just make yourself more marketable from a resume is increase the resume. If you don't see anything happening, writer, help them beef up your resume. The second is you can harden and make sure that that to a hiring. You have to keep trying, right? Never give up. First part of your question. The second part of your empowerment, right? Like the cyberspace or the cybersecurity industry is it's at a watershed moment. What does that mean? It means that you have a gap in terms of resources that are lack gap where you have people who are trying to get in the industry can't get in. What gives? Two hands to clap, right? So jobs, right? They have to do a better job of beefing up the job requirements. But us on the other end, into the cybersecurity industry, we need great skills that are transferring that will work on day one. How do you do that? By shutting off your Netflix. Pull the cord on Netflix. Dedicate a day, 2 hours a day, 5 hours a week, 10 hours a week, learning and growing and being a better, right? The second thing you can do, create content on LinkedIn. LinkedIn to create content. And by the way, when you post on LinkedIn, post between 8 o'clock in the morning and 11 o'clock, depending on where you are. That's your
Yes.
windows for you, right? Do is you can help others, right? Mentor others, coach each other, coach others, be helping, mentoring, and coaching others. You and you expose yourself. So not only are you getting that you're a leader, but you're also you're helping others. And the other thing is that gap we said about between the hiring manager. Why not find a bridge, a creative bridge, right? That could be a recruitership service. It could be a podcast like anything, right? Use your imagination, but don't. Oh, I'm going to beef up my resume. I'm going to send it out. No, become an entrepreneur because you have skills. You have think about life that's brought you here today. You can leverage to industry. So
Yeah, very
that
yeah, very valid points. Points that actually makes a lot of sense. I mean, actual advice that was actually passed on to me when I was at that point in terms of being confused about the industry and making the necessary decisions. Also recognizing the fact that the cybersecurity space or landscape is very huge. And what happens, I recognize, is that you have various job descriptions for different roles. And then you have persons who are trying to apply for every single cybersecurity role there is and trying to learn every single tool or try to get every single certification. And that is where I recognize that there is a lot of confusion in that it's best to find a particular area, a few skills or a few tools, just to understand the foundational principles of cybersecurity. Bearing in mind that cybersecurity is all about risk, safeguarding data and managing the risk. We cannot totally get rid of risk, but it's all about managing those risks at an acceptable level. Learning the tools, understanding those fundamental principles uh, are some of the things that I always share with other persons in the industry in terms of getting that basic understanding of how it is that cyber ties into the business and the foundational principles of security and what it is that you're trying to achieve. Now, from your standpoint, what's your advice in terms of certifications or degrees, or as they always say, what comes first, the chicken or the egg? So, sort of a situation. What's more? I mean, or can you provide some sort of like career guidance in relation to where you are and how you actually got to where you are now in your educational journey? What sort of, I mean, guidance can you provide?
I think it's quality, not quantity, right? I think that's probably and just like you said, it's a very vast. If like someone, uh, I'm assuming we have folks in, right? Um, if I say to you, and I'm going to America, what does that mean? You're coming from different parts of Africa. Are you coming from Morocco? Are you coming from Senegal? Where are you coming from? Right? I'm going to Chicago. Okay. What neighborhood? Why am I using that analogy? It's just to the cybersecurity industry. It's important to have your GPS coordinate where you start. So start with the end first, but then when you start with the end in mind. It's about education to learn something about cyber, the roadmap. Right? Start with a when we so a lot of someone's cybersecurity landscape, a score based on them, a roadmap, and then there's a target operator to reach, right? So I think that's all here is you need to know where you're going. You don't know where you're going, you will then tend to go, which is wherever. With knowing where you're going, punch in what you're going to go, yes, and head towards it. Follow the coordinates. In cyber, you could do vulnerability management. You could do identity and access. You can do right. You could the gamut. I want to focus on I want to focus on insider threat, or I want to stay whatever it is. You could use Google. You could use LinkedIn. There are many different avenues, and take that path to right. So that foundation, pick a spot, go towards the ever, which you kind of alluded to, Richard, is understand the bigger picture, right? What is the bigger cybersecurity? I would say start there, go in, right? Go down, almost like a funnel, right? Cybersecurity, right? Confidentiality, risk management. Okay, what does that mean? Reality. That's probably going to do something with encryption, integrity, probably hashing, availability, right? Zero trust network, that type of stuff. So I think if you have a level of understanding, right, regardless of wherever you start, make sure you begin and go towards having towards the target, right? The thing before I close this, and for you to know that strategy, right? So most of what you learn, we call what the 70-20-10 rule. Learn is going to be on the job. 20% to be through mentorship and this, and 10% is going to be formal learnings, getting another degree, right? But so it's above that, right? So I'll stop there.
Okay, great having you sharing with us. Indeed, it's very insightful. I mean, there's a lot more to share, definitely. So we definitely would have to have a part two in light of time constraints as usual. And I mean, many of us, we have our busy schedules. So it was indeed a pleasure having you. Very insightful conversation. And for those who continue to connect with me on the Cyber JA podcast, please continue to. It's always my pleasure. Thank you again, Chris.
Yeah. Being here, and if anyone in your audience want to, feel free to connect with me there, have a conversation. But this is something I'm passionate about: sharing, supporting, and empowering the under. Be to have any conversation to help you successful. So looking forward
definitely
to connecting.
Okay, great.
Cool.
All right.